without any testing.
Yeah,
and what they're doing, they're cross-putting fish genes and vegetables and
Right.
all this weirdness.
Yeah. Yeah, you put shrimp genes in tomatoes to make them pink and things like that. But hold on. So, but in so just to use an example, in drug testing, if you're testing a new drug, there's phase 1, which is does it seem like it might do anything? Is it going to kill everybody or kill every animal you give it to, or is it going to actually maybe work? Phase 2 is a little bigger trial, just to see that it actually, in a larger trial, appears to be safe in animals at least, and do what you want it to do. Phase 3 is kind of the pre-release trial. That's the big human trial where you
trying on all the prisoners.
Or they don't even do drug testing in this country anymore. They just go off to India or Indonesia or something. So if the results of the test are bad, nobody knows.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's the companies doing the testing.
Right. No, there's so many reasons it's wrong, but still, you do phase 3 testing, which is where you are looking, is it effective and does it seem to be safe? And if it can get through phase 3 testing, then the FDA will approve it and it gets marketed. And now it's in phase 4, which is now you've got, instead of 3,000 people in a phase 3 trial, you've got 30 million people taking it in the world, and you're still monitoring it to see, is it having any effects? So things like Celexa, that anti-inflammatory drug that turned out to kill hundreds of people because of what it did to their hearts, it never showed up once in the phase 3 trials. But when you turn it loose on the world, phase 4, it showed up a lot. So the GMO foods, they've just gone straight to phase 4 testing, no pre-testing, just turn it loose on the population and hope that it flies. So, that's why there's a kind of a concerted effort now to boycott the large corporations that are funding the fight against labeling.
Oh, yeah.
And so,
So
I just want to say something. There's a fellow named Jeff Smith who has written quite a bit about GMOs and done research, and he has a movie and a book out on it. And what he found out was that they did testing for 60 days, and they found there was no problem with animals and people. But he said then they carried on tests they actually did for 120 days, and they found a lot of problems. And one of the biggest problems they found with animals is it wrecked their gut.
mm-hmm.
And they were getting all kinds of problems because they couldn't absorb.
Yeah, well, gut, the most heavily prescribed medications in the world are medications for gut problems. So things like, the drugs that are for indigestion and those kinds of things. And so what if it's not, a problem with your gut? What if it's just you're toxic from stuff that's in your food? But again, it's just another reason to be eating organic and be eating, because right now, even though there's no labeling about, although Whole Foods is, I don't have a lot of praise for everything Whole Foods does, but that's one thing that's really nice, is that they've kind of said we're not going to allow GMO foods in the store, and which is going to force labeling.
Well,
is there enough third-party validation going on that since GMO labeling, there's no real standards around it right now? If you buy something at Whole Foods, and I agree with what you say, it's great that they're kind of enabling that to happen. But I mean, is there enough third-party oversight, like QAI for organic, that we can actually believe that if the label says non-GMO, that it's actually non-GMO? Because I've read articles to suggest that farmers that are going organic and non-GMO, it just takes one little wisp of a neighboring farm that's using GMO, it gets onto their crop, and then suddenly their entire produce.
Yeah, no, the simple answer is there's not as much as there should be. The one thing, there's still in California maintained its own GMO, organic standards. So a California Certified Organic Farm, CCOF. So if it's a CCOF certified, so the farm is a California Certified Organic Farm. That's a much stricter standard and much more oversight. So if you're at the farmer's market, go with the people who are CCOF and not the ones who have that little white and green USDA thing. CCOF,
certified.
California Certified Organic Farm.
Because one vendor at the farmer's market told me, said that when we put that organic, it doesn't mean that the whole farm is organic. Part of that is organic because the rest is not. And
Yeah, well, that's the thing. CCOF, it can't be labeled organic in CCOF unless it's 100%. But the USDA standards are more lax. You can even have, you could have a food that was only, the food could be labeled organic, but only 90% of it is organic. But it can't be, there can't be any GMO still with the USDA standards. So it just gets unnecessarily complex. But I want to move on. So what can you do? What's the experience that you can do? And I mentioned William Davis and Grain Brain. So these are two doctors that were working with people. And again, I mentioned them not so much that their books are great, but one thing that both of them talk about is the fact, and they're both talking about wheat. So Grain Brain and Wheat Belly, those are the two books. And one of the reasons they kind of focus on wheat, and so Davis in his practice, the internist, he wasn't telling people to avoid gluten, he was telling them avoid wheat. Because for most people, 99% of the gluten they're going to see is from wheat. And he just wanted, you know, when you're out in an office seeing people, you realize that if you want compliance, the simpler you can make it, the more people are likely to comply. So gluten can get a little complex. You know, is there gluten in oats? Well, not really, but oats have things similar to gluten, and so you can get gluten-free oats, even though it's not really gluten they're free of. But you know, but wheat, you know, if you just say avoid wheat, no wheat, zero wheat, 100% off wheat, people go, oh, I can do that. You know, I'll eat wheat-free stuff and things like that. But one of the problems both of them found with wheat is what I talked about earlier, which is that modern wheat is a whole new animal. Yeah. So, you know, amber waves of grain doesn't exist anymore. Yeah. You know, wheat now, you know, and it's not GMO, it's by a process of selection, the kind of selection that farmers have been doing forever. But what they've selected for is a little 18-inch high cultivar. So if you're standing in a field of ripe wheat, it doesn't even come up to your knees. And it has higher yields, but the wheat that it produces has very little protein, a lot more gluten, a lot of other proteins that are new. So this process of selecting for higher yields has been for the yields, for the benefit of the farmer. It hasn't been for something that would benefit human nutrition. And so I have some people who can somewhat tolerate the ancient grains like emmer wheat, or you know, some of the older. Eichhorn is one. Emmer. Spelt.
It's also that the gluten is what makes the bread rise.
Right.
So I would think that bakers, commercial bakeries, would prefer high gluten flour because
they love it.
They don't have to knead the flour so much to
right.
develop the gluten.
Yeah, and so you know, if you want to ask me the question, if I give up wheat, where am I going to get bread? You're not. Yeah. You're going to get maybe some crackers like, you know, Molly's Gone crackers or whatever it is, you know, those things.
But you say that the spelt bread, the ancient grains, are
for some people they don't even do well with that. So if you,
as rice bread, pure rice.
Yeah, well, but one of the things you get into, and this is again, just one other component of food, and this isn't really about sensitivities now, but let's just go to a different page here.
Rice also have arsenic. Rice also have arsenic.
Yeah, the arsenic isn't the biggest problem. Well, no, it's not. I mean, this.
It'll take longer to cure.
You know, this valley is full of arsenic. It's in the water. It's in everything. You know, arsenic is one that the body is usually able to get rid of about as fast as it goes out as fast as it's coming in. So if your ability to excrete is impaired, arsenic can become a problem. So just to give you an idea, you know, apricot pits and peach pits, you know, are so rich in arsenic that you don't feed, you know, once you've spent all day making apricot jam, you don't take the peels and the pits out and feed them to the hogs because they'll all be dead the next morning. But you know, this was the Valley of Heart's Delight. This was about the only thing that was going on here was apricot trees. And you know, growing apricot trees for 150 years, and there's still as much arsenic in the apricots today as there was 150 years ago. So, you know, we got a lot of arsenic here, and it's not the big problem, you know. So, but you're right, rice has some arsenic in it. But so do sweet potatoes. Arsenic is a natural ingredient in everything, you know. So it's you want to kind of Wait, but the problem that I'm going to talk about now, not a problem so much, but just want to say something briefly about insulin resistance. And it's because of this issue of gluten-free stuff. So I talked a little about diabetes. So insulin resistance is the definition of type 2 diabetes. But essentially what happens is you eat a diet that has a lot of sugar in it and a lot of simple carbohydrates. Simple carbohydrates, the chemical name for simple carbohydrates is monosaccharides. Mono, one, saccharides, sugar. So the molecular structure of the sugar of the starches that are in potatoes and white rice and popcorn is pretty much identical to the molecular structure of sugar, except it's folded this way instead of this way. So your tongue perceives it as sweet if it's folded this way, and it doesn't perceive it as sweet if it's folded this way. But how much energy does it take to pop it this way? None, virtually none. So when you eat a bag full of popcorn, all of the starch in that popcorn is sugar by the time it hits your stomach. That's one of the things saliva does. So, so it isn't just, and that's why, there's so much research on carbs. There was, just to go back historically, a lot of this understanding of the ill effects that come from eating a diet based on agricultural foods, people kind of first started becoming aware of that in the mid-'80s. That led to a lot of research that came to fruition 20 years later. You follow people for 20 years eating a certain kind of diet, so starting in 2005, you couldn't go a week without some study being published that was showing the ill effects that a high carbohydrate diet had on health. And so, even the kind of dietary advice given to diabetics, basically a glycemic index diet. So, if we take, let's see, rice cakes, potatoes, popcorn, short grain white rice, table sugar, and an apple. So glycemic index is just a measure of how much a certain quantity of food will raise your blood sugar. The reason that's important is that if you raise your blood sugar, then you need insulin to bring it back down. So just what's the guess? What's the highest glycemic index, the one most likely to shoot your blood sugar through the roof on this list?
Rice cakes.
Potatoes.
Rice cakes.
Oh, you know your stuff.
What's next?
Potatoes.
Actually, it's popcorn.
Oh, wow.
And then potatoes.
Really?
Okay, what's next?
Apple.
Yep.
Table sugar. Really?
No, table sugar is 5th on the list. Short grain white rice is the bottom. So, yeah.
Not affecting fiber though. You're getting fiber with the apple and fiber with the potatoes. Isn't that?
Yeah, you're also getting a lot of sugar. If you want fiber, add some flax meal to your oatmeal in the morning or something like that. So, fruit sugar is sugar. Honey is sugar. Maple syrup is sugar. Agave syrup is sugar. They're all sugar.
Why is table sugar way down the line though?
Because these are all, it's just